In the summer of 1941, the world was forever changed. It wasn't just a battle for land. It was a battle for survival. Operation Barbarossa, the largest military invasion in history, would shape the course of World War II. But what made this campaign so devastating? And why did it fail? Let's dive into one of the most critical moments of the 20th century. It all started with Adolf Hitler's obsession. His vision for the future of Germany hinged on a brutal conquest of the East, specifically the Soviet Union. To him, this wasn't just a military campaign, it was an ideological battle. The Nazis sought to wipe out Jewish Bolshevism and seize the vast resources of the Soviet Union. But this would be no small feat. The Germans weren't just planning for another blitzkrieg. They were preparing for the largest invasion in history. Over 3 million German soldiers, 600,000 vehicles, and 3,000 tanks were mobilized along a 1,800-mile front stretching from the Baltic Sea to the Black Sea. But for all their preparation, the Germans made a critical mistake. They underestimated the vastness and resilience of their opponent. At dawn on June 22, 1941, the world witnessed the thunderous start of Operation Barbarossa. It was fast, overwhelming, and relentless. The German war machine pushed forward with devastating air raids, artillery bombardments, and tank assaults. In the first few weeks, the Germans advanced at lightning speed, encircling entire Soviet armies and capturing thousands of prisoners. The Soviet forces were caught off guard, poorly equipped, and devastated by the sheer scale of the attack. By early July, German troops were within striking distance of Moscow, the heart of the Soviet Union. It looked like victory was imminent. But despite the initial successes, there was one thing the Germans didn't account for: the sheer resilience of the Soviet people. In response to the invasion, the USSR mobilized its vast resources. Stalin, despite being caught off guard, quickly reorganized his command structure and issued the famous order, "Not a step back." The Soviet people dug in their heels, and the Red Army, though initially disoriented, began to regroup. The Germans, overextended and facing supply issues, were unable to capitalize on their early momentum. The Soviet Union wasn't defeated. It was just getting started. But as the battle raged on, the Germans were met with an unforgiving enemy, both in terms of weather and warfare. The brutal Russian winter began to descend upon the German troops. Lacking winter gear and unprepared for the harsh conditions, the invaders found themselves at the mercy of the weather. Meanwhile, the Soviets used their own geography to their advantage. The longer the Germans remained in Russian territory, the more difficult it became to supply their troops. In the vast forests and endless steppe, the Germans found themselves fighting not just a conventional army, but the land itself. It became clear that this was not going to be a quick victory. By the time the Germans reached the outskirts of Moscow in late 1941, their forces were stretched thin and exhausted. The weather had turned, and Soviet reinforcements arrived in the nick of time. In early December, the Soviets launched a counteroffensive. The Battle of Moscow was a turning point. For the first time in the war, the Germans were forced to retreat. The dream of a quick victory in the East shattered. Operation Barbarossa, once seen as a path to ultimate domination, had stalled in the snow and mud of the Russian wilderness. The cost of Barbarossa was staggering. Over 800,000 Germans were killed or wounded, and millions of Soviet soldiers and civilians lost their lives. Entire cities were destroyed, and the scars of war would remain for decades. But beyond the human toll, the failure of Operation Barbarossa marked a shift in the war. The Germans had lost their momentum, and the Soviet Union, now fully mobilized, would go on the offensive in the coming years, pushing the Nazis back toward Berlin. Operation Barbarossa was not just a turning point for the Eastern Front, it was a turning point in the entire war. It marked the beginning of the end for Nazi Germany. In the face of immense hardship, the Soviets endured, and eventually, they would push all the way to Berlin. The failure of Operation Barbarossa showed the limits of Hitler's ambitions, the resilience of the Soviet Union, and the harsh realities of warfare. But it also reminds us of how a single campaign can change the course of history. So, the next time you hear about World War II, remember the incredible scale of Operation Barbarossa and how one of the largest military blunders in history set the stage for the downfall of the Third Reich. If you enjoyed this deep dive into one of the most pivotal events of World War II, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and let us know what you think in the comments. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.